Welcome to Heads Up HR, the podcast from QuestCover, bringing you the latest HR insights, legislation updates, and practical advice to keep your business compliant and your people supported. No jargon, no stress, just advice you can actually use, and the chance to be part of a workplace community that's learning and growing together. Hello and welcome back to Heads Up HR, joining us for the final episode of 2025. As always, I'm your host, Perry Johnson, and once again, I'm joined by our wonderful Director of Operations, Hema Mystery. How are you today, Hema?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks for inviting me back.
No problem. So, as I said, this is our last episode of 2025, so I thought it would be a good opportunity to grab you and kind of reflect and review on the changes, the legislation changes that businesses have had to navigate this year, with also a slight snapshot of what's to come next year as well. So we've obviously had a lot of changes this year, a lot more kind of going on in the background as well with things that businesses need to prepare for. So I first of all wanted to cover the increased employment costs that businesses have had to swallow up this year. We've had things like the national living wage and minimum wage increase, which is set to increase again in April, but also increases to SSP, family-related pay rates, and NIC contributions from employers as well. So there's been a lot of big changes surrounding that, a lot more costs for businesses to cover. So from your experience, with our clients and with giving advice, how have these increased costs affected businesses this year, would you say? What's kind of the general response we've seen? I
don't think really anyone has welcomed the changes.
No.
They've had significant impact on all organisations. The statutory rates for national insurance contributions was above inflationary increase, etc. So that's had a huge impact. Companies do expect the national minimum and the national living wage to increase each year. Those increases themselves were quite significant. That is the drive from the government to achieve a median salary of around about 26,000 within the next few years. So I can see the shift. And again, for next year, they are increasing some of the pay rates much more than some of the others. And the drive really is to try and get everybody on one rate. But in terms of the impact, it's been quite significant. It's been a very negative impact in that it's driven up costs, and companies have had to be quite imaginative and inventive in terms of where and how they achieve paying those costs. And that could be an increase in redundancies, a hold on recruitment, limited salary increases, etc., growth, stunted, etc. So there's so many different ways, but unfortunately we've also seen a rise in organisations closing, going into liquidation or administration, etc. So it's a really, really tough environment at this moment in time.
And of course, obviously, navigating those costs and whether it's through redundancies or any of those other means, those come with a whole host of other HR issues to kind of be aware of and to make sure that you're getting those right. So I think it's been a really tough year for businesses, and obviously businesses, I'm sure, would want to be able to give their employees more to, be able to meet what these changes are saying. But at the end of the day, it's a cost that is on the business, and that does impact the employees down the line as well. You touched on it a little bit, but how can businesses navigate swallowing these increased costs and the pledged increases for next year as well? You mentioned redundancy and other things. What would be kind of the suggested route, would you say?
Yeah, I think organisations, they really do need to think long and hard about what their options are. I think redundancy would be a last resort. Look at where else can we do cost savings. And it could be some of the slightest little things that, if you're paying for licenses for things that you don't necessarily want, if something's £500, another £500, that's £1,000, you can look at where can we actually reduce cost. If you typically follow a third party to introduce new members of staff, etc., can we look at different ways of actually recruiting members of staff? Can we recruit through the job boards or through social media, etc.? Can we sort of start utilising our own staff at the moment and do refer a friend? Different ways to actually reduce the cost. But also look at efficiencies within the organisation. Almost, if we've always done something this way, is it really the right way to do things now? Is there a better way of doing it? Automation. We've got the invention of AI, which is is a really positive tool if it's used correctly. For all organisations, and it's not necessarily a situation where you would use AI to reduce headcount, etc. It's actually to try and improve someone's job spec and utilise their skills and their experience in a different way, and let AI take over other aspects of it, etc. So there's lots of ways and means of doing things, but the redundancy side of things would be a last resort for me personally. Having said that, what organisations also have to realise is, irrespective of their financial situation and how difficult things are for them, they must always ensure they follow the right process and follow the law. Because without actually trying or without thinking things through, if they fail to follow a fair and proper process, they will end up at tribunal for either unfair dismissal, discrimination, etc., etc. So the law is there to protect both parties, but the company must ensure that they follow the right process.
Absolutely, yeah. And alongside all of these kind of financial changes, they also come with policy changes that are needed as well. When SSP increased, family-related pay increase, that needs to be reflected in company policies as well. So with that in mind, and with those policies needing review again next year when future changes come in, what would you say is recommended practice, and how often should businesses be looking to review and update their company policies?
Okay, so I would probably put this into two banners. The first one is a contractual change, and then policies and procedures. So what I mean by contractual changes, on an annual basis, the national minimum wage and the national living wage changes. Every time there is a contractual change, for example, a pay change or an hours of work change, etc., the company is legally bound to confirm that change to the individual in writing within a month of that change. So that's really important. And we do come across an awful lot of organisations that fail to do that, irrespective of the fact that it is a national change, it's a statutory change. In terms of policies and procedures, the company must always ensure that their policies and procedures are compliant, but also they're fit for purpose. So, for example, neonatal care came in April of this year. That is a statutory procedure. However, the individual company should have a suitable policy to make sure that their staff members understand what it is, what their rights are, how to go about it, what their eligibility criteria is, etc. But also for line managers to be able to follow that as well.
Yeah, 100%. And interestingly enough, you beat me to my next point, which is the neonatal care leave policy. That's another big update that came earlier this year. Could you just explain a little bit for anyone who's listening who may not be aware what the neonatal care leave policy, because it is not something that I suppose most employers would encounter all the time. It's just as and when these things happen. Yeah,
it is. It came into effect on the 6th of April, and it is across England, Scotland and Wales as well. So it's the right that applies to eligible parents where a child is in neonatal care for several days. There's a lot of technicalities in there, and the policy that we have on the system available
on document library.
It outlines everything. But it's all about where the individual employee's child is admitted into neonatal care within a certain time period after birth. And it enables the parent or the parents to have a period of time off without running the risk of loss of pay, but also absence issues, etc. It's a statutory entitlement for them. So it's a very, very positive entitlement, but there are incredibly complicated systems and processes to follow.
Yeah, as with most HR things, that's how it rolls. But yeah. So I believe it's up to 12 weeks in most cases that care leave would be provided for and paid at statutory family pay rate or 90% of earnings, whichever is lower. So as you said, what evidence? So we know who would qualify for neonatal care leave and pay. You've kind of covered that, but what evidence can employers reasonably ask for? Obviously, it's a delicate topic for new parents and to be asking for any kind of evidence. What would you say the approach?
It's very much, rather than evidence, there are first things. There's a qualifying period. You need to have the relevant employment service, etc., to be eligible for it. But this is where the communication part comes in and the open dialogue with individual staff members. If individuals are aware of a policy, obviously it's very insensitive to when somebody is pregnant or somebody is expecting their baby to sort of say, oh, these are all your rights, etc. But if it's there and available, people will be aware of that. If somebody is having a difficult situation or experiencing a difficult situation, then that open dialogue, I think it's for the organisation to also speak to the individual and explain what the rights are. And one of the things that I want to stress very, very clearly is the neonatal care statutory procedure is the bare minimum an organisation should do or must do.
Yeah.
If they choose to offer more and go over and above that, that's absolutely fine as well. So don't feel that you are restricted to only allowing an individual. The rules are very, very strict in that the child has got to be hospitalised in neonatal care over a period of time to be able to get that absence. It can be taken over a certain period of time, etc. You know, there's so much detail involved. But you as an employer, you also have a duty of care. And I absolutely accept the fact that there's operational demands, financial demands, etc. And you might not always be able to deliver and do what you want to do. But it's about communication and that open dialogue, which is so important.
Yeah, absolutely. So then another kind of question I have is how it interacts with other types of family leave. So say, for example, a baby needs neonatal care immediately after they're born. Would this then pause the maternity leave, or do they run alongside each other? Does neonatal care leave replace that?
Not necessarily, no. And again, this is where the devil's in the detail in terms of what their entitlements are and what they want to do and how they want to do it. The person that's on maternity leave, they would continue to have their maternity leave for that whole 12-month period if that's what they choose to do. Neonatal care may be taken by the other parent, etc., or the individual parent may decide to take the neonatal care towards the back end, etc. So there's lots of different ways to utilise the leave, and each of the statutory entitlements should be seen in their own entitlement. So they are singular rather than one overlaps the other. Yeah. That's how it should be viewed. But what I would suggest is if anybody is unsure or they have a similar situation and you've got access to our services, is to absolutely pick up the phone and speak to one of our experienced trained advisors, and they can actually guide you through that.
Yeah, 100%. The advice they give on the advice line is always top quality, if I say so myself. So I think there are some other important changes that you wanted to cover as well. So could you just give us, there's obviously a whole host of changes that we could talk all day, but some of the other big hitters that we've seen this year? Yeah,
absolutely. Well, it's been a bit of a roller coaster of a year, and we're expecting the same next year. But just a few things to highlight and to sort of raise with everybody is in April, there was a significant ruling from the Supreme Court, and it returned its ruling on the statutory interpretation of the Equality Act on the meaning of a man and a woman and sex. And that outcome has significant implications on all employers as well as outside of employment as well. And we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, where the guides, the girl guides, they've
recently
issued.
Changed. And I think there was another group as well I saw in the news the other week. I can't remember off the top of my head, but we're starting to see certain groups take action on that ruling. Absolutely.
So that was significant as well, but it also provided clarity in terms of what is considered a man and what is considered as a woman, etc. And that extends into, the sporting world, etc. So that was a huge change as well. Most people will be aware that on the 1st of July, this doesn't apply to Northern Ireland, but the government issued their roadmap for the Employment's Right Bill.
Yeah.
An awful lot of consultation and changes and communication is coming out currently about that. It's likely that we will have further communication from the government on various changes in the coming weeks before Christmas, before they break up, etc. So, that's something that's really important. One of the key directives of the Employment Rights Bill is for a new Fair Work agency to be appointed or to start. And Matthew Taylor, who some people may be familiar with, he was the person who led the Taylor Review in 2016 about the modern working practices, and from that we got the Good Work Plan. He is now heading up that agency, and he is going to be creating its structure, etc. And the idea behind this new agency is to transform the labour market's enforcement, protection of employees, etc. It's about giving people more voice as well. So that's happening. And then obviously in October of this year, it was the first anniversary of the new sexual harassment law that came in October 2024, where the employer has a legal duty to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment, which also extends to third-party harassment as well.
And that's going to be tightened up even further next year,
absolutely.
Is
Yes, I think October next year is when that's going to change, given the fact that everything keeps changing.
It may change.
It may change,
even more,
yeah,
but that's currently what it's looking like.
Yeah, so that's going to change as well. But again, similar to what we've talked about there about, the definition of sex is with sexual harassment, I don't think there's been an increase of sexual harassment. I just think that the raised awareness, the new legal duty, etc., has highlighted more and more of those situations, and we're certainly seeing more and more cases come through as well. Historical cases or even current cases. So that's quite an open thing, and you can understand why such legislation is introduced, because there clearly are issues that need addressing. Some of the significant changes that we're expecting in the new year, and again, bear with me because some of these dates may change, but most people will be aware that the minimum wage and the national living wage will change in those dates.
Been announced,
absolutely. Again, the rates have increased more than you would typically expect, but that's an expectation in terms of what they're looking to achieve soon. The statutory payments such as statutory maternity pay, etc. The proposed changes have been announced only this week. We wait for confirmation on that. We are expecting, and we know that the SSP rules are going to change. So the SSP rates have been announced. And it's expected that April 2026, the statutory sick pay entitlements will change. So currently there are 3 waiting days, and that will be abolished, and SSP will be payable from day one. There'll also be an average pay for those that earn below the SSP rate, etc.
Are they removing the lower earning threshold for that? Or
yes, they are. Yeah, and that's where they will bring in the 80% ruling. We've got the skeleton of the rules. We're waiting for the finer details as to how that actually will work in practice. Although I did read something today, given the ping pong effect at the moment that we've got in the government in terms of all the other legislation changes, some of these dates or some of the implementation dates might change. Yeah, so we wait and see.
There was all the talk about the ban on fire and rehire practices, but that's now being watered down because it's struggling to get through the House of Lords, I believe. So
it's in. The legislation is in, and it's due to come into effect next year, etc. But the finer detail is still to be finalised. Similar to that, other things that we're looking at is maximum period for collective redundancies, day one right for paternity leave, day one right for unpaid parental leave, whistleblowing. Fair Worker Agency will be established in April. So, and that's just a snapshot of what's happening. So I come back to my roller coaster. It is up and down.
It is up and down. And as you say, that is just a snapshot. We are running a webinar on the 21st of January 2026 from 11 a.m. till 12 p.m. that will be covering more in depth all of the upcoming changes next year. Also, our next episode of the podcast will also be focusing on the changes next year as well. So hopefully we'll cover those in a little bit more detail. But as you say, it's constantly changing all the time. It's constantly moving and the goalposts are shifting. So it is difficult for us to kind of keep up with it, really. One final thought to kind of conclude on. If there are businesses out there who haven't yet implemented policy changes from changes that have come into effect this year that we've discussed, would you say that it's recommended for them to look to update them sooner rather than later, or would it be okay for them to wait until after further changes come along and then just kind of do all the changes at once, make that reflect in their policies at one time?
The changes should be made at the time that the legislation changes or is implemented. Doing it after the event really is not helpful. The policies and the procedures give the rules, the guidance and the structure in terms of what employers will offer and do and what the individual can expect a company to do, but also what is their entitlement. Communication is always key.
Yeah, communication is king in the world of HR.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, a lot of changes. As you say, it's been a roller coaster of a year for businesses. More on the way next year. So the best way for people to stay tuned on the updates is to subscribe to the Heads Up HR podcast for one. Also, stay tuned for all things Quest. Check us out on social media where we'll post information on our upcoming webinars. We cover legislation updates all the time. So definitely a valuable resource, free to attend, completely open to all. So we'd recommend tagging along to January's webinar if you can. But for now, I think that wraps us up for another episode of Heads Up HR. Thank you very much, Emma, for joining with us. Look forward to having you along for future episodes as well. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And to all the listeners at home or in the car or wherever you guys are, thank you for tuning in to the last episode of Heads Up HR for 2025. I hope you all have a wonderful Christmas break and a fabulous new year. And we look forward to having you join back with us in 2026 for more episodes of Heads Up HR. That's all for this episode of Heads Up HR. Thanks for joining us. Be sure to follow and share the podcast, and we'll be back soon with more HR updates and insights from Quest Cover.